Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched BlacKkKlansman from 2018. Now, I've been really interested in watching this film since before it came out, since when it was originally announced. Spike Lee, I think, is an incredible director who has some truly incredible films to his name, and ones that will be on greatest of lists for a very long time. But he also makes films that are not always the easiest to watch, that are have very strong, impactful, intentional stories to them that want to send a message, and largely do very well. There are a whole lot of films that have come out, especially in the last about 10 years, that are sort of have been sitting on my list as I'm not sure if I have like the mental capacity right now to watch this, but I want to watch it. And this is one of those films. Especially because the last 10 plus years in the US have been particularly fraught with, let's say, social and political issues. It has been a time of a lot of very powerful and important films that are either directly related or tangentially related to those issues. And this is definitely on that list. Now, this is a film that is not about the modern era. It's about the 70s, and it's about the... Okay, I got to be careful here because I don't want YouTube to... I don't know what YouTube is going to read out of what I say. So I want to be very careful because YouTube just doesn't like words, apparently. It is a movie set in the 70s, dealing with issues of... systemic racism, and in particular the activities of a certain organization, as alluded to in the title of the film, that were of particular relevance at that time, and have become in modern era a bit more covert but not invisible. The reason for this film should be readily apparent, because not only is it literally relevant, it is relevant in a more general sense to talk about social issues of current times and events specifically that had gone on in the few years preceding this film and the ones that would come later. This is a very socially pertinent film at the time it came out, and it still is right now, and it will probably continue to be for a very long time. And ironically, that's sort of what's the hardest thing to watch about this whole film, is knowing that it would have been relevant if it came out in the 70s, it's still relevant now, and it will probably continue to be relevant in a very painful way. Now, I want to talk about the story a little bit, but I want to talk about a lot of the production. This movie definitely has a visual style that definitely says it is a modern movie. This is not pretending to use cinematic stylings that would have been era appropriate to the 70s. But it definitely has the clarity and the cinematic knowledge of somebody making something in 2018. And Spike Lee, definitely being a student of cinema, has a great bevy of skills to his in his arsenal to sort of do visual storytelling. But a couple of things I think are worth noting. There are certain shots and visual elements that, while stylized in a modern way, are very much nods to styles that were done in previous eras. In particular, the blaxploitation genre, and some of the more cinematically unusual, shall we say, visual choices that were made by what was basically a form of outsider art at the time that genre of movie was being made. So it's really interesting to see how those special sort of niche visuals can be modernized and alluded to for somebody who has sort of a historical understanding or has seen things from that era and particularly from that genre. So it's really interesting in that way. At the same time, there are some more general production elements that make this look very appropriate to the time. And while all of the modernization is there, this doesn't feel like a bunch of people putting on the 70s. Visually, the color tone throughout the film is muted in an appropriate way that doesn't dull too much, but gives you sort of an aesthetic that feels much more appropriate to the 70s. And at the same time, the sets and costuming are impeccable in terms of not being like outrageous in any way, but being very appropriate to the time, having appropriate clothing, appropriate hair and makeup, appropriate like vehicles and all these other things that really help you to very seamlessly immerse yourself in the period. And to that point, immersing yourself in the period is incredibly important because, as continually relevant as the topics at hand in this film are, contextualizing that in the social landscape of the 70s and in particular the racial dynamics that existed pretty commonly throughout most of the US, that is really key towards understanding who the characters are and what their motivations are and what their struggles are within the context of the world that they live in. The main character, Ron, is a guy who's sort of stuck between worlds, who is struggling with an identity where he wants to bring justice to a world he sees as unfair, but there are two different sides, both that in some respect reject him. That's sort of the core of him as a person and his personal struggles. But ultimately, his personal struggles are not the focus of the film. They are contextual. They contextualize his actions and his decisions, and make him a very full-fledged character as you see him work through the world that he's in, and show the decisions that he makes and what really matters to him, and what kind of risk and what kind of sacrifice he's willing to make to do what he sees as the right thing. To that end, I swear we've seen John David Washington in another film in my video series here. I didn't check, but I'm sure he's shown up before. I think he's a fantastic actor. I really like him. I haven't seen him in enough stuff, and I would like to see him in more. But to that point, he does a really good job of portraying a very nuanced character who shows off his struggles without being very explicit about how he feels. He's still a man in the 70s. He's still a black man in the 70s. He still has to have this very buttoned up sort of demeanor to himself, even when he's really going through it. And I think the subtlety required to portray that kind of action is greatly to Washington's credit. But everybody else on the cast also does really, really well. And that's especially difficult when you have a film where there are a lot of people, and some notable names playing some really villainous characters. So even I'll vaguely spoil something about who one of the characters is. Topher Grace as David Duke is fantastic. He's not on screen a huge amount, but portraying the sort of charisma that somebody who is like sickeningly awful still can have when they are dedicated to being and thinking a certain kind of way. That's fascinating to see portrayed. And I think Grace does a really great job of humanizing an inhuman character, an inhuman person. I don't think I even mentioned prior to this. This is based on a true story. I don't know the actual accuracy of it, and I believe it's based on getting the book rights to the real person, Ron Stallworth's memoir. And so obviously I think that is also taken with a grain of salt. So there's multiple layers of like how much accuracy and then like how was it adapted to screen, because there's only so much you can show in a 2-hour movie, and making it concise and digestible. At the same time, to the point of all of the actors, I think what's really interesting is sort of the black comedy of all this, the dark comedy, I should clarify, of watching villainous characters be so sort of unaware of their own absurdity and own incompetence and own madness, that you have to sort of, you can't help but sort of internally laugh at them. There's very little in this film that is overtly very funny, but there are a few scenes that are actually overtly very funny, but they're very obvious. But there's a lot of low-key humor throughout the film that is just looking at the honest behaviors of certain individuals and going, oh, you're completely insane. You can't see how insane you are because you've got other people who are parroting the same things back at you, and so on and so forth. Obviously, this movie delves really deeply into some very clear social issues, but it's also a very obvious allegory for a lot of the social issues that we have in our current period, and not just the overt ones like racism. The political and media landscape of current times are difficult, to say the least. And this movie generally does a pretty good job of subtly commentating on that in a way that doesn't overtly point it out, but sort of says, you see the parallel, right? And I really appreciate that. Spike Lee is not always the most subtle. I don't think anyone would have accused him of being the most subtle director and writer. But I think in this movie, he actually does a lot of that very well. However, I do have to make a gripe with this movie, as I usually do with Spike Lee. At one point or another in almost every one of his films, I go a little like, really, dude? Was that necessary? And in this case, it is the very end of the film. This is not a spoiler for the film at all, I promise. The very end of the film, they just end the film and then show a bunch of footage from the Charlottesville riots in 2017. And while that is very relevant, it is way over the top and completely breaks all subtlety in the film. In my opinion, it should not be part of the film at all because it is not directly related to anything that goes on. And there is so much good social commentary going on in the film itself that to literally at the end just staple on this modern issue, modern event as a "do you see it's still going on" kind of thing is so completely unsubtle that I really wish it wasn't there, because it is important, and it's important to remember, and it's important to draw those parallels. But if somebody watched this whole film and didn't get what you were saying already, then you're not suddenly going to get them to get the message by showing the like actual news footage at the end of the film. I don't think it has any place. But you could just shut off the movie when the movie ends. Don't stick around for that part. It's a bizarre choice, but it's not the first time I've felt like that with something Spike Lee has done. Anyway, I think this movie's really, really powerful, really well produced. It's very well balanced in its tone, balancing between like the genuine social commentary, the seriousness, the drama, the tension, and then some comedy to sort of even it all out. And once again, makes me excited to see whatever Spike Lee does next, because he always turns out something at the very least really interesting. And I'm really glad to see a bunch of actors who, some of whom are bigger names and some of them who are, not as big names, put on some really, really great performances. I'm really happy with this film. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I've been your host, the Social Solipsist, and I'll see you guys next time.